Good afternoon, and welcome to this special commentary roundtable edition of the In Focus podcast. I'm Peter Laffin, senior editor with Washington Examiner, and I'm joined by a trio of esteemed colleagues, Madeline Fry Schultz, our contributions editor, Jeremiah Poff, editor of Restoring America, and Conn Carroll, our commentary editor. Welcome to everyone.
Welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
So, TPUSA. A lot of really interesting headlines to come out of all of the speeches that we saw over the weekend. I'm curious just what your top line takeaway is from everything we saw. What does it suggest to you about the state of the Republican Party, where it is now, and what it's going to be moving forward? Why don't we start with Conn?
Yeah, I think clearly by design, I think the event was meant to show kind of J.D. Vance as the leader of the Republican Party conservative movement right now. I think that's largely true. It does seem as though TPUSA and Eric Kirk want to back him for 2028, which I do think is where the party is now kind of overall. And I think all the warts of the movement were there to see all weekend, from the opening night with Ben Shapiro and then Tucker Carlson following him up.
He knew that Nick Fuentes is an evil troll and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility. And that is precisely what Tucker Carlson did. He built Nick Fuentes up, and he ought to take responsibility for that.
To hear calls for deplatforming and denouncing people at a Charlie Kirk event, I'm like, what? This is hilarious.
So I think it's a work in progress, and there will be still a lot more that needs to be said and done. But I guess I'm probably in the minority, at least in this room, on that, in the sense that I don't think it's necessary or helpful for Vance to come in as an office holder and just start naming names and saying this person's in, this person's out. Just state your principles, and as the issues come up, address them. And I think that's really all the best he can do.
Madeline, Jeremiah, is Conn alone on that?
Yeah, I do disagree. I think that Vance is in a position absolutely where he can say, these are people who we don't want in our movement. And this is not, you don't want to be too exclusionary, and you don't want to take people who are, by what most conservatives would consider a definition of conservative, part of the movement, and say, well, I don't like you, you're out of the movement. But it is completely fine to say, Nick Fuentes, who Tucker Carlson interviewed, kind of kicked off this is the interview heard around the world. This is the thing that kind of kicked off this firestorm in this moment that we're in. I think it's perfectly fair to say, no, he's not someone that we, not Tucker necessarily, but Nick Fuentes is not someone that we want in the movement. And people who espouse blatant racism or Nazi tendencies, whatever, it's gonna turn off the average voter. This isn't good morally or pragmatically to say, oh, well, we just kind of let anybody who wants to be part of the movement in. I think it's totally fine to say, here are our boundaries, especially for JD Vance.
I think that JD was in a unique position of, I don't think any vice president has ever spoken at a conference where half the conference speakers were demanding that he speak out, and the other half was saying that, shut up, don't say anything, we're going to defend you. I think Conn alluded to the first night, the Ben Shapiro followed by Tucker Carlson. It's this remarkable microcosm, I think, of the ongoing feuds and divisions within the conservative movement. But one thing that I'm going to disagree on, I don't think this started with Tucker interviewing Nick Fuentes. I think this has been building for a long time. And in a lot of ways, the Charlie Kirk assassination sort of was Charlie Kirk getting assassinated kind of broke the floodgate open and pushed this conversation into the forefront in a way that it hadn't been in a long time, but it also wasn't new. I mean, you think back to the 70s when Buckley and the John Birch Society were at loggerheads, and then when Buckley and Pat Buchanan had some fascinating back and forth in the 90s and 2000s where Buckley didn't really condemn him outright, but also didn't tried to clearly differentiate himself from him. None of this is new, but it's also, I think, recognition that there's some underlying disagreements within the conservative movement that go far beyond just, the tax rate should be at 20% versus 23%.
I think that in conservative newsrooms, conservative circles, I think what we're seeing in the reaction to this, probably, amongst ourselves and amongst the broader movement, is that this fracture in the party, it seems people have hardened their positions on one team or another following this weekend. I don't think this weekend was a unifying weekend for the conservative movement. And I felt myself hardening against the Tucker, Megyn Kelly, that whole thing. And I felt myself very much with the Vivek Ramaswamy's and Ben Shapiro's. But regardless of where any of us come down, I think it has to be said, at least from my point of view, that this is healthy. I don't see this as necessarily the big disaster that everybody is saying that it is. If we can compare what's happened in the conservative movement with the whole Nick Fuentes heritage thing, with, say, the woke crack up on the left in the late 2010s and this, the difference is that we're having an open debate about these things. And when the fracture on the left happened 10 years ago, everybody fell in line immediately. And so, however you fall on either side of this, I see it as really heartening that we're having open arguments.
I do think that there's one overlooked aspect of this, and that a lot of this is as much about what happens after Trump as it is about current divisions over, what the Trump administration should be doing vis-a-vis Israel or, Ukraine or whatever else. Because there's a whole group of the establishment, or even the Tea Party wing of the conservative ecosystem, that sort of begrudgingly made peace with Trump and has been planning for what happens after Trump since he was elected in 2016. They thought that they could beat him at his own game effectively with DeSantis, and that didn't work out. And now Trump really is leaving. He won't be on the ballot ever again. And now he's also in a way chosen an heir apparent. And so you have to knock down the heir apparent if you want to take the movement in a different direction. And I think that's going to be the defining issue of the next 3 years is, will the Republican Party continue the Trump project, or will it return to what it was before, while making peace with the Trump, while claiming that it's a continuation of the Trump era? And I don't think that people can really divorce any of this from that broader context.
I guess for me, I guess the word would be frustrating. I don't even know what we're fighting over, right? Like what specific policy about Israel are we fighting over? What specific policy about Ukraine are we fighting over? What specific immigration policy? I don't get it. Like there's also adjacent to this the whole Heritage American debate, which I don't get either. What are we even talking about? So I mean, I get that, Candace Owens is crazy, and I don't know why Megyn Kelly is defending her, but I also don't care. I think we should be speaking about larger. Maybe it's because I'm just a dork, but I think we should be more about like policy ideas that will help American people's lives, not who likes who behind the scenes at TPUSA. Because I frankly don't care.
So much of it is soap opera nonsense. But I will push back on that, Con. I do think that having this debate on the sort of overarching meta narrative, what is this movement? I think that's going to be what informs the policy that comes into the post-Trump GOP. I don't think the Republican Party really knows what it is at all without Trump. And so we're starting with this really zoomed out debate. And once we can agree on, okay, are we a creedal nation, or does it matter that I've been here 5 generations and you've been here generations too? That's going to inform what immigration policy is going to be. That's going to inform what economic policy is going to be to some extent. So I think maybe it's really important that we're doing this now too, so far in advance of the 2028 primary, because we do need to understand what the party's going to be going forward. Madeline, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Jeremiah said earlier about this not just being about the Tucker Nick Fuentes thing. You know, the Charlie Kirk's death really broke this open. I think he was kind of trying to steer TPS USA in one direction, and now it's moving in a different one, and everyone wants to speak for Charlie Kirk and say this is what Charlie would have wanted, and so now everyone has this chance to kind of use this as their trump card, and people are saying different things. But I also agree with you, Peter, that basically this is a really good sign that you see people taking the very same stage, one after another, and debating each other and criticizing one another and having this argument. And it's not like we are just moving in one direction without this kind of discussion internally. But I do think that it's a little bit more important maybe than what Khan thinks, because I think it's not just, it can seem a little bit like inside baseball, media figures kind of like catfighting, having all their issues, but there is this kind of these bigger questions that are being drawn out of this. So like what is in the realm of acceptable debate on, in conservatism. And I think the important thing is to kind of draw out how are we going to get back to these policy discussions from kind of the abstract or maybe personality based arguments that we're having right now.
On that note, Peter, I really like what you said about the Republican Party not really knowing what it is without Trump. And I think that's actually been true for the party for many, many decades. Because if you think back, what was the Republican Party before Trump? It defined itself as the Reaganite party. It defined itself as in a sense, a sort of cult of personality around Ronald Reagan. And I think that's been a major mistake by many people over many decades, and including up to today, many of who saying, oh, we need to return the party to the party of Reagan. The party is not defined by one person or one president or two presidents. And yes, Trump is going to be a defining figure in the history of that party. But when the party aligns itself with, oh, this president is who we're trying to emulate, it gives the sense that the party is focused on a certain moment in time and not focused on the immediate problems of the moment. And I think that's a big reason why Trump was able to so successfully co-opt the party in the 2016 election and since then.
I thought Trump had a very weird week last week. I just want to tick off a few of the things we learned. This stuff happens so fast that, if we don't stop and think about it, we can miss it. There's obviously the Rob Reiner tweet, which was, we've all said what we had to say about that. It's Trump is Trump. And, in this sense, that was a shame. There was also the renaming of the Kennedy Center to the Trump Kennedy Center. And do we name things for people when they're still alive? That was new to me. I didn't, and congratulating, I saw Caroline Levitt congratulated John Kennedy 50 years, 60 years after his death for having for having the honor of having the building named after him now split in half. So that was interesting. Some other things, the bizarre Walk of Fame plaques going into the Oval Office that make fun of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. There was the marijuana executive order. This was a very, very Trumpy week. What do you make of all the collection of sort of strange headlines that we got last week?
Well, I think you left out the big speech.
Oh my gosh, yeah, the big speech.
The actual policy
that's
part
right.
of the week.
That was probably the biggest one. And he yelled that speech at America in a room by himself. And it was like this cheerful, I'm bragging speech. But he was screaming and spitting, and he looked like he was going to hit us if we didn't agree with him that everything is wonderful and the country is hot. The Trumpiest thing I've ever seen was that speech.
Already, I've secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States, which means jobs, wage increases, growth, factory openings, and far greater national security.
What do we make of this collection of stories?
The first block seems like Trump being Trump, renaming stuff after himself, being funny with, making fun of his predecessors. That's all seems par for the course. I do think he is uniquely drawn into. He's uniquely bogged down in a policy quagmire he never has been before with these tariffs, and he doubled down on them again. I think it's very clear when you go back and look at the jobs numbers coming out of Biden, that they were up on the going up on the right swing, going the right direction. And then after Liberation Day, everything started going the wrong direction. I think it's bad policy, and he's just super committed to it. And it's not helping. And telling the American people that the economy's awesome when it's not. It didn't work for Jimmy Carter. It didn't work for Joe Biden, and it's not going to work for Trump and the Republican Party. And I don't think Vance has been contradicting Trump, but I think the tone from when Vance talks about the economy is very, very different than Trump,
Very different.
which it has to be. And that's going to be the issue, going forward is how uh, Vance navigates what policies of Trump he keeps and how he talks about the economy moving into 2028.
Madeline, what do you think of the very Trumpy week that we just experienced?
I think something that Trump needs to work on more is distinguishing between his base and the normie voters who picked him, why they picked him, and then what they are willing to excuse in him. And I think renaming the Kennedy Center, adding the plaques on the pictures, I think it's not the greatest idea, but I don't know that anyone really cares outside of Washington. I think this is the kind of stuff like with the East Wing renovation, this is the kind of stuff that we like to say, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. But I don't think the average voter, it's not really something that they're paying attention to. But something they will notice is the Rob Reiner tweet, because everybody loves at least one of Rob Reiner's films. I think that kind of stuff is going to rub people the wrong way. And obviously the economy in that speech. I don't know how many people watched it, but I remember thinking, I don't know, my grocery bill is still high when I go to the grocery store. I'm not feeling like there's a huge difference. And I wish that he had sort of calibrated it to, like he was talking to the median voter, and what he's willing to do to help them out. And I think that there was a little bit of that, but it just felt like Joe Biden all over again. The economy is great, everything is awesome, and then the media parrots it. And then you're looking at your receipt after you go to the grocery store and you're like, I don't see that.
A really strange part of that speech, Madeline, where he's bragging and telling us everything is wonderful, is that usually he gives those speeches in front of crowds and people are cheering him on and giving him positive reinforcement at every step. And to see him there alone in that room telling us all that everything was wonderful, I had big Biden vibes on that. And I think it was for that reason. I want to say one thing though, quick about the Reiner tweet. Again, not to make too much of this because this is who he is and this is who he'll always be. But I think we get into a rut sometimes talking about everything in political terms. This wasn't a political moment. It came out of the mouth of a politician, but it wasn't fundamentally a political thing. I was suddenly yanked back into the realization that, wow, the president of the United States is not somebody I want my son paying attention to. And that's a terrible feeling. I just want to voice that. I want to say that I know in terms of policy it's not going to affect that much, but I'm glad that my son is only 2.5 and doesn't really understand full sentences yet and couldn't really hear much analysis about this. Because when somebody's stabbed to death by their son, you don't gloat. And I don't want I feel it feels so icky that we live in this moment with this kind of person. And as much as I might agree with Trump on some policy things, I want to say that out loud.
Well, and it's also even more jarring considering the fact that the right spent the last 3 months getting people fired from jobs and canceled effectively because they were dancing and gloating about Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. Um, so, they're in a sense, like it kind of sucked a lot of the moral like high ground that people had over that when they were doing it, which I think was justified at the time. But I think Trump's tweet on the Reiner thing really undermined that. I do want to say one thing about the economy. I think Trump is I do understand his frustration on this because for the thing is that voters want deflation. And deflation is, if deflation happens, it means that there's a whole lot else wrong with the economy. And unfortunately, I don't really see a a way out of for anyone to really change the pricing situation, because all you can do is just kind of stop the rise of prices from going up at the rate that they were going up under Biden, which Trump largely has. But the thing is that people want the prices that they were paying back in 2019, and that the reality is that that's just very unlikely to happen. And if it does, Trump's approval rating is probably going to sink even further on the economy because there's going to be much deeper problems at play as well.
Con, I'm curious what you made of the inflation report this week.
Oh, well, I mean, to go to Jeremiah's point, I just, again, I think it comes back to him being stuck in this tariff quagmire. And it's larger than that. I think, he should have come into the office being that, look, prices are the number one issue. I'm going to do everything I can to lower them, whether that's go full bull or on permitting, whether it's making sure there's as much stability as possible in manufacturing sector. I do think, immigration and deportations can play into this, but, I think HUD put out a report last month showing how much illegal immigration was driving up housing prices, rent prices throughout the United States. So I think there was a missed opportunity here for him to go make that his number one priority. And, instead he wanted to do Liberation Day and all these other things, which I think, distracted from a more, pure policy goal. And so that just gave Democrats an opening to pretend that they're the party of affordability, when really their solution to everything on affordability is just, subsidized demand, which never works. But pretending that Trump was ever going to be disciplined on message was always a pipe dream. I don't know. I mean, I was not disappointed by the Reiner thing. I just didn't care. It's Trump's being Trump. I have three kids. 19, 16, 13. They none of them thinks Trump is like an admirable person. The Rob Reiner tweet didn't change that. So I think it's healthy for us to be, skeptical of our leaders. Not that Trump's tweet is good because of that. But to me, it's just a distraction from what he could be doing better to advance interest in making prices go down and America more affordable again.
Jeremiah or Madeline, I'd love for either of you to respond to what Con is saying about the tariffs.
I can give it a shot. I think that the one thing is that Trump campaigned on the tariffs, and I don't think that he as much as there is like that, paradox of I ran on tariffs and I also ran on lowering prices, and now the tariffs are, arguably raising prices. I don't think you can. I think he has to stick to them in large part because he ran on them. This was not something that he just thought up middle of his term. This was a core campaign issue for him because he promised to rebalance trade and to increase domestic manufacturing. Whether or not that ends up being successful, that is to be seen. But he was elected in part because he made that promise, and the industrial towns that supported him, I think, were looking for something different, anything different. And we'll see if the different they got is what they needed. But
I'll just say this on that is we had a first term of what we thought Trump meant by using tariffs for policy. And it was not the nuclear bomb of Liberation Day that he unleashed on us.
Right, but also, I mean, he was also held back from a lot of what he wanted to do in the first term, in part because he didn't seem willing to contradict his advisors in a way that and this time he has advisors who are more willing to go along with it.
Yeah, but and then also I would just say, one of the many benefits, skills, powers that Trump has is to just say a bunch of stuff and follow what he wants and totally ignore what he doesn't want. Right? Like he says a lot of stuff which he never follows through with, and he just picks and chooses what he follows through with.
But this is also
Um,
something he's been a true believer in going back to the 80s.
no, I get it. He believes it. I'm just saying he's trapped in a way that is not been good for the economy or his administration.
We're coming up on New Year's, and we talk a lot about what New Year's resolutions might be for the people we cover, the politicians. What about us? We, as journalists, as media content makers, we consume a lot of media. Is there anything in our own particular media diet that we might be willing to change going into next year?
I can go first. I've been thinking about I need to read more fiction books, and I think I read a lot of nonfiction, new books that are coming out, political, historical analysis, things that people are talking about a lot. But I think that it's good to have some the power of fiction books is that they can form your moral imagination. They give you ideas of how people work. Very often, I'm talking about like good books. I want to read a little bit more classics. And I think that it's something that a lot of people who are very bookish will sometimes just kind of pick a couple of books that they always reference, like the number of 1984 quotes that I've had to take out of pieces because everyone wants to always say this is Orwellian. And usually what they actually mean is this is a little bit more like Brave New World, So I think expanding my literary horizons a little bit is a good goal for me.
I'm going to jump off of Madeline there, but I'm going to go more for the historical, you know, books, biographies and stuff that I did a lot. I did a good amount of fiction reading in the last year, but there's been every day I'm reminded that there's so much in formative history, especially of the United States, that I have like blind spots in, and I've got this. I'm looking forward to this. I have this big biography of George Washington that I intend to read in the new year.
I guess I'll steal Madison's or Madeline's, and may hopefully give her, or hopefully she can give me some recommendations. Because I think, looking for new stuff, everything out there that's new in the past 5, 10 years is just such garbage. Um, so I think it, helps to go back and kind of look at, some more classics, reread them. I have kids in high school and um, college now. And yeah, there's books I haven't read, for 20 years, which are fun to revisit. And so, I do feel like it's nice to kind of piggyback on my daughter's English class and reread all the books she's reading. And that's probably enjoyable, the most enjoyable.
Well, if you guys haven't read Scoop by Evelyn Waugh, you got to.
Oh,
That's an
absolutely.
obligation for any journalist.
That's where the Daily Beast comes from.
That's right.
I never knew that. I thought that was so cool. It's maybe the only reason I ever liked them. The Daily Beast, meaning the website,
The
is that
name.
they got them from a great book. Con, you're going to appreciate my New Year's resolution. I bought a printer, and I'm
Ah,
printing everything. When I come into the office, I see Con first thing in the morning. He's got 5 or 6 articles printed out on his desk, ready to read, make
and don't
notes,
forget the highlighter.
the highlighter. And I thought, wow, that's just too sane. I need to copy that. And so I have a printer now, and I'm starting out my mornings with printed articles, and I want to cut down on screen time. I know we always say, I can't believe nobody said I'm going to be on Twitter less. I thought we were all going to say that. I
Well,
almost
because
said
I'm
you're
not a
not allowed
liar.
to say
Because
that.
I'm not going to be on Twitter less.
Right.
I'm going to be on there just as much. So,
I'd rather make a resolution that I know that I can keep rather
right.
than one that I know I'm not going to keep.
Last thing today, everyone, we want to acknowledge a very difficult departure for us. Jeremiah, this is your last day at the Washington Examiner. I believe you've been here 4 years,
Yeah, 2 on the news side, 2 on the opinion side.
and you are leaving us. We can't say where because we don't want anybody to follow you there, wherever that may be. But I know that everybody here is really hit hard by the loss of you. You're a very valued part of this team, part of what makes us, we think, the best in the business, and we're very sad to see you go.
Well, Peter, don't let me make sure to remind me to write you down as one of my eulogists at my funeral. But thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I am sad to leave, but I'm, these things, this is life, and I'm looking forward to what's next.
The
He's
last
not
thing.
going. Okay. I was just going to
Oh,
say,
no,
he's
go ahead,
not
Carl.
going that far. It's a small town. We'll see him again.
It is. We'll see him again. But if you want to know everything about Jeremiah Poff, if there's one thing that encapsulates everything about this man, is that on his very last day, he wore his nicest suit
And the
and his
tie.
best tie. And if that's not class, what is?
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else have anything to add on this?
We'll miss you, Jeremiah.
Thanks,
You'll be
Con.
greatly missed. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.